Some people say it's a nice house, and some people say it's a tear down and rebuild. This is 7289. It's about what God did to save our house, the amazing miracle that He performed, and that's what I want to tell you about. So we bought the house in February 2006. When we first moved in, we got a lot of looks. We didn't quite fit in the neighborhood all that well. We pulled up in a U-Haul and we got some looks. You know, this was kind of a prominent neighborhood for us. I mean, you know, this was the first house I'd ever bought. My girlfriend at the time, she had 2 girls and I had 3 kids, and we both bought the house for selfish, self-centered reasons. I was just short of being a drug addict. I was playing in a band full-time and a CAD operator for a structural engineering company. And we bought the house because my girlfriend at the time was just coming through a divorce, and I just got custody of my kids. I was a Christian. I'd been a Christian the majority of my life, but wasn't really following God. My life was a mess. I was doing a lot of drugs at the time. We really didn't fit in, and it seemed like, you know, we was under a microscope. You know, we had a lot of kids. We had 5 of them, all of them very old. The majority of them in high school. Our 2 youngest girls were in elementary school. In July of 2007, we missed our first house payment. And by October of 2007, we had gotten a sheriff's sale. Now, a sheriff's sale is basically, they give you a date when you don't make your house payment. They give you a date and they say, okay, by this date you need to be out of your house. And if you're not out of your house by that date, then everything inside the house becomes property of the bank, and the bank will auction off everything inside the house, and they will auction off the house as well to regain the money that they had loaned you. At the time, my girlfriend and I, we didn't know what we was going to do. I didn't know what to do. All I knew to do was go pray, but that really just seemed kind of pointless, because there was times prior in my life that I really went to God and asked God for things, and it never seemed like He really answered my prayer. And I needed answers right now. I didn't have time to wait. I was really scared that God wasn't going to show up. And why should He? I mean, I wasn't living for Him. You know, I wasn't going to church. Like I said, I was doing drugs. I was drinking every day. I was a mess. I was happy because I had my kids, but this was the first house I'd ever owned. And I'm trying to mix my kids in with another set of kids with a new girlfriend. It wasn't ideal by any stretch of the imagination. In my heart, before I got upstairs, I knew that I needed to be willing to do whatever God told me to do. Whether it was pack my things up and get out or keep the house, I had to be willing to do whatever He wanted and not what I wanted. So I go up there and I pray, and almost immediately I know in my heart that God's telling me to stay. And I didn't know how that was possible. You know, how can I stay? It didn't make any sense. The problem was my girlfriend at the time, she made more money than I did. And when the housing market crashed, she was the breadwinner. I barely made half of what she made. And now that her income's gone, how in the world can we make the mortgage payments? I could barely make the utility payments on this place. I was kind of excited in one hand because, really that's what I wanted, because I wanted my kids to have their own room. I went downstairs and I told my girlfriend, I said, listen, I don't know how we can do it, but I really believe that God's telling me to stay. And incredibly, she looked at me and she said, okay. And I said, now, are you sure? You know what that means, right? Books, all the kids' clothes, furniture. It's all or nothing. God's going to save our house or we're going to lose it all. But if God allows us to lose it all, he will give it back. And she said, okay. And I was like, all right, fine. That's what we're going to do then. And we're going to stand and we're going to believe that God's going to save our house. So October comes around and we've got our first sheriff sale. We know the sheriff's going to show up. A few days before the sheriff was supposed to be there, it got canceled. We had no idea why. We was just kind of blown away. In one aspect, we're relieved, and in another way, we're like, well, what's next? And then we started noticing the people driving by and taking pictures of the house. And the kids started noticing people driving by and taking pictures of the house. And at first I didn't understand why they were doing it, but it didn't take very long and it was like, okay, I get it. They're taking pictures of the house because they're going to auction the house off and these people want to buy it. At one point, my neighbor next door, while I was at work, he chased a person out of my backyard that was in the backyard taking pictures of the pool and taking pictures of the deck. When I came home, he was like, John, he was like, I had to chase this guy out of your backyard. What is going on? And I knew at that moment in my heart that, because I didn't want to say a word, I didn't want anybody to know that we were in foreclosure. I already felt like that we was underneath a microscope. But I knew in my heart that I needed to speak my faith. I had to tell Steve. So I told him, I said, well, Steve, I said, we're in trouble. I said, we're in foreclosure and we're believing that God's going to save our house. And he looked at me like I was a Looney Tune. And he says, John, he says, I like you. He goes, but believing in Jesus is like believing in Santa Claus. It's for the weak-minded and for people that need a crutch. I didn't know what to say. It just kind of blew me away. And I was like, yeah, well, that's what we believe right now. That's what we're believing in. The whole time we're going through different sheriff sales. And it was maybe 5 or 6 months on down the road. And my other neighbor on the other side comes knocking on the door. And he hands me this envelope and he says, hey, I got your mail in my mailbox. He says, I didn't realize it wasn't mine until I opened it up. And as soon as I glanced down at it, I knew it was from the bank. And I knew we had just bounced a bunch of stuff in our account. I knew what he saw was horrible. And as soon as I shut the door, I looked at it, and it was well over $300 that we owed in fees, bank fees and stuff for overdrawing. So now everybody knows that I'm in foreclosure. Everybody knows I'm broke. My girlfriend's Envoy got repossessed. My Harley got repossessed. And every time I turn around, somebody's taking a picture of my house. I'm praying to God and I'm asking God, please, am I really supposed to stay? And every single time, yes, I would feel this soft voice on the inside, and it would just say yes. And I would come out of the prayer room, and I'd be like, how? And at night I would, I would just go out there, and I would just pace back and forth there at the pool. I would look up at the stars. Oh Jesus, please, please, I need you bad. But we also saw the Lord's hand protecting us. The sheriff's cells were coming and going, and even though our situation hadn't changed, we felt like the more times that we stood, and the better it got. To put it in perspective, we went 2 years. We went through 6 sheriff sales. Amazing, just amazing. And towards the end, the company I was working for, they had moved, and I had an opportunity to cash in my 401k, and I thought, well, I'll cash in the 401k, and maybe with that will be enough money to get us caught up, and the bank will allow us to refinance or have a modification to our loan. So I called him. I said, I have over $30,000. It's your guys's if you guys will modify our loan. And they said, Mr. DeVore, we can't help you. You're too far in rear. The foreclosure process is going to continue. And we called them repeatedly. I mean, repeatedly. And every single time, no, we're sorry. We can't do anything for you. So we finally rolled up on 2009. And this is weighing heavy on me. We took the money and we invested into the house. We put the money into the house, and in the back of my mind, I knew that we still had about $10,000 left after we did all the lights and everything in the house, and I knew that well, if the sheriff does come and does lock us out, maybe I've got enough money here. I can get my kids into an apartment or something and buy them some new clothes, and God wanted me to give it away. So I went to now Becky is my wife. She's no longer my girlfriend. We had got married during this whole thing. And I went to her and I said, hey, I know that we have this money in the bank, but I really believe God's telling me to give it away because I know in my heart it's a safety net. And He's our net. And we have to trust Him. And she said, without any argument at all, she said, okay. It just blows my mind every time I think about it. So we gave it away. And I was asking God, please, please, please take this off me. Bring this to an end. And He did. It was in October of 2009. And 2 days before the sheriff's sale date, they called. And they was like, Mr. DeVore. And I said, yeah, this, you qualify for a modification for your loan. I was like, what? Really? And it was like, yeah, you qualify. And my heart started racing in my chest because I'm thinking, I just gave all that money away. We don't have that money no more, because I know they made notes about it, all those times I had called and said, I've got this, I want to give it to you, so I'm thinking now they're calling to cash in, and I ain't got it. And I said, well, what do I have to do? And she says, well, you're going to need to go to these classes, and we're going to send you some documentation in the mail. You just need to sign them and send them back to us. Later on, a few weeks later after that, I was at work, and come to find out, Linton Loan, which is who we had our mortgage through, was in big time trouble by the U.S. government. The U.S. government was taking them to court because they had bulldozed thousands of homes into foreclosure. What I mean by that is that they were skipping steps in the process of the foreclosure process and foreclosing on these families faster than what they should have, and was forcing them out of their houses without due process. This was the same mortgage company we had. all those poor families. And all I can say is they couldn't foreclose on the house that was covered by the blood of Jesus. That guy, my neighbor, that said that believing in Jesus is like believing in Santa Claus, he came over to my house shortly after we had gotten, I don't know, it was sometime, it might have been a year or so after we got good with the bank. And he comes over to my house one day. I was working out in the garage. And he comes over and he says, hey, John. And I said, yeah, Steve, what's up? He says, do you remember me telling you that believing in Jesus is for people that need a crutch? And I said, yeah, I remember. And with tears in his eyes, he said, I need a crutch. And Steve received Jesus in my driveway. I didn't deserve for God to do anything for me. I hadn't earned anything from him. And yet he showed up and saved my house from a lending company. They were practicing bad methods of getting rid of people. And yet God saved and protected our house because my wife and I stood in faith and believed that God was going to show up. And we never wavered from it. We didn't move not one thing out of this house. I don't care what it is. I don't care how crazy it is or what God's told you. But if he told you and you know in your heart that he spoke the words to you, then you stand. You stand. And you stand some more. And you don't give up on it. You don't let go of it. You hang on to it. And he will show up.
This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place. That you would bear my cross. You laid down your life. That I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me.
But praise God, today I enjoy this property with my wife and my children and my little grandchildren, because what God did for me, he will do the same for your family.